Okay, you need direction on writing a request to withdraw your request for an IEE, meaning independent education evaluation. That's what an IEE means. For those of you out here that don't know what the acronym means. Now, if you've made a request for an IEE, then I don't know when you asked. Oh, I guess you asked this. I don't know, about a month ago, right before the Christmas break. So I don't know what the current status is. But if you made a request for an IEE back then the school system has two options. They can either agree to fund it. They can't delay the response. They can either agree to fund it, or they can file due process against you. I don't gotta say against you, but they're filing due process to defend their own evaluations. And at that point, that's it. Those are their only two options. Now you sit there and you go, well, don't you have a right to an independent education evaluation? Yeah, you do. But there's a difference, okay? You always can get an independent evaluation. But there's a difference. There's the independent education evaluation that you can go out and procure privately and pay for. You always have that right, and nobody can ever prevent you from getting that. And a school system, by law, must give your report a good faith consideration. Good faith consideration. Okay? Now, the other independent education evaluation is one paid for by the school system. And that's the one that you have a right to request at public expense, meaning the school system pay for it, using a professional of your choosing, as long as they meet a very, very basic criteria called a agency criteria, meaning that and typically an agency criteria would compose of that they've got to be licensed in your state, they've got to charge a comparable rate with everyone else in the community. The other one is they can only be, let's say, 100 miles, 150 miles away from, where your Board of Education or where your boundaries are for your school district. That would be the minimal limitations that they can put. They can't sit there and say, well, you got to choose these off of our list and you can't do that. That's not allowed. That's if you're asking for a publicly funded IEE, not one that you go out and get on your own, which you have every right to do. But if you made a written request for an IEE funded by the school district, and let's say the school district comes back and says, well, we haven't conducted our own evaluations. Well, you can only ask for an IEE, an independent evaluation funded by the school system, if you are challenging an in-house evaluation conducted by the school system that's been done within the last calendar year. So if you make a request, even coming up to 10 months or 11 months after that evaluation was completed, then don't be shocked if the school system says, hey, can we just do another in-house? And then you have your right to request an independent paid for by the school system. But let's say they do their evaluation, it's only a month or two old, 3 months old, and you put in a written request saying, hey, look, I don't like the results of your evaluation. And the federal law, state law, does not require you to give specifics as to what you disagree with. Now, the school system can ask you for those, but they can't force you to provide a logical answer. Why is that? Well, because you're not a psychiatrist, you're not a psychometrist, you're not a psychologist. You don't understand all the machinations and wording and what a bell curve is and all those other things. So how could you, and so by requiring for you to pinpoint what exactly you disagree with in their in-house evaluation would be putting a responsibility on you and an assumption of a knowledge base that you don't have. So yes, they can ask you what you disagree with, but if you can't properly describe it, you can just go by your gut feeling and say, I just don't think that I don't think it's correct. I'd like a second opinion, which is basically what an independent education evaluation is. It's just a second opinion. And we do that within the medical world all the time. So I don't know why schools would be offended by you asking for a second opinion, paid for by them. Not paid for by them, it's your money. You're a taxpayer. But that's where, when it comes to that point, if you are making the request in under that year time frame, and shortly after they did their own in-house, then they've got to make a decision real quick on whether they're going to fund it or whether they're going to defend their own through due process. But defending it gets expensive. Approving it is less expensive, but I do know school systems that are cantankerous and that will draw a hard line and force parents into these due processes because they don't want to pay for an independent evaluation. It's insane. I think it sets a very, very, very poor aggressive tone in a setting where we're supposed to be working together. So there are school systems that do that, and I don't like them. I think that they have a wrong outlook on what special education is supposed to be about. But if you want to retract that, then yes, all you got to do is submit it in writing again, saying, look, we've thought about it, and we want to rescind our request for an independent education evaluation at public expense. Make sure you put the public expense in there, because you still have your right at any point to go get your own. And at that point, the IEP team must consider it good faith consideration. They can't discount it. And if you're afraid that they will, but you have an independent evaluation that's favorable to your child and what needs to happen, yeah, the school system can ignore it, but they ignore it at their own risk. And when I say they ignore it at their own risk, if you have reasonable recommendations that would help provide your child with a free and appropriate public education, and the IEP team and the school side of the IEP team ignored it and did not give it good faith consideration, and they did not adopt it, then you, through mediation, through state complaint, through Office of Civil Rights, or through due process, can challenge the school's decision to not incorporate the reasonable recommendations contained in the report.